Well, if you ask me what's the best way to start doing your math homework, very easy. Just dive into it. I'll show you. One, two, three. Woo! Just like that. Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to take a look at all the different identities that are in number 5 and in number 6. Yes, you're going to have to memorize them. Well, maybe not for this time around, but you will eventually once you have practiced enough with them, okay? Number 5 is called even and odd identities. And number 6 is called sums and differences formulas, okay? So here we have the odd and even, or even and odd identities. And basically it says that if you have the sine of negative u, you will end up with negative the sine of u. If you have the cosine of negative u, you will end up with cosine of u. And if you have the tangent of negative u, you will end up with the negative tangent of u. Now, what do you notice? That if you start with a negative, you end with a negative. You start with a negative, you end with a negative. Except for who? Yeah, that's right. Cosine. If you start with a negative, you end up with a positive. You will remember that cosine was not the one that followed the rule. When we said all students take calculus, and we went to the fourth quadrant because we had an equation with negative values, and if we went this way towards the negative, this is where cosine is positive. So if we went that way, the sine was negative. If we went that way, the tangent was negative. But if we went this way, negative rotation, the cosine is positive. That's because the fourth quadrant is where cosine is positive. So if you go in the negative direction, cosine will be positive. Now remember that theme, because cosine here, there, and there will never follow the rules. Cosine is the only one that doesn't follow the rules. So if you're one of those at home that doesn't like to follow the rules, maybe you are in the cosine family. But if you do follow the rules, good for you. That means you are in the sine or in the tangent family, okay? Here we go. So now let's take a look at their reciprocal functions, and that is the cosecant. If you start with a negative, you'll end up with a negative. If you start with a secant of negative, you start with a negative, well, secant is related to cosine. Hey, he doesn't follow the rules either. You see, you end up with a positive secant of u. And finally, the cotangent of negative u equals to negative tangent of u. Once again, for all these even and odd functions, the only one that doesn't follow the rules is those that are related to the cosine family. Okay. The second part that we're going to be working on today is called the sums and differences formulas. That would be number 6 on your card, okay? So let me show you once again how the cosine still doesn't follow the rules no matter what we do, huh? Well, you're going to have to remember 3 of these formulas, and we're going to have to repeat them, and after enough practice, they will come back to you. Here's the first one. Whenever you have a sine, you're going to say sine, cosine, cosine, sine. Can we say that 3 times? Ready? Sine, cosine, cosine, sine. 1. Sine, cosine, cosine, sine. 2. Sine, cosine, cosine, sine. 3. There we go. So whenever we have a sine, it'll always be sine, cosine, cosine, sine. Now, it's either going to be addition or subtraction. That's why it's called sums and differences formulas. But since sine always follows the rules, if you start with a plus, then you will end up with a plus in the middle here. If you start with a negative, you will end up with a negative in the middle here because cosine follows the rules. Okay. Now, let's go sing the second song. The second song is for cosine. So when you are working with a cosine, sum or difference, again, you're going to remember this song. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Ready? 3 times. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Once. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Twice. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. That's number 3. As you can see, cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Okay? But cosine is the naughty one that doesn't follow the rules. So if you start with a positive, then this will be a negative. And if you start with a negative, then that will be a positive. See, doesn't follow the rules. Never, 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 never. For those of you that don't like to follow all the rules, that's okay. I was one of those too and still am, okay? A little bit of a rebel, and that's all right. All right, the tangent of a plus b or a minus b. Okay, here's your third song. You're going to memorize tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. Can you do that 3 times? Let's try. 1. Tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. Tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. 2. Tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. 3. All right, what does that mean? It means it's tangent, tangent in the numerator, and 1 tangent, tangent in the denominator. Now this time you have 2 signs, plus or minus, right? Remember that tangent was sine over cosine. In your previous identity, the definition of a tangent is sine over the cosine. That means that the numerator part is a sine, and the denominator part is the cosine. And since it's a cosine, it doesn't follow the rules. Alrighty. So, when you start with a plus, the numerator will be a plus, but the denominator will be a minus. And when you start with a minus, the numerator will be a plus because it's a sine, and the denominator will be the minus because it's a cosine. So, start with a plus, plus and minus. You start with a minus, minus and plus. Okay? Now let's go practice with some examples from your worksheets, okay? Well, all right, let's see which ones we're going to be working with today. So, as I told you earlier, today we're focusing on the even and odd identities. That would be number 5. And we're also going to focus on number 6, which are called the sums and differences formulas, okay? 5 and 6. So I'm going to keep them really handy here next to the side so that if I need them, I'll always go back to them. But remember the songs. If it was a sine, it is sine, cosine, cosine, sine. If it was a cosine, it's cosine, cosine, sine, sine. And if it was a tangent, 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 1, tangent, tangent. And remember that darn cosine never likes to follow the rules. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to focus today on some questions related to letter A of sums and differences. I'm not going to do all 20 of them, but I'll do half of them, about 10 of them. And then if you need help, obviously, all you got to do is go to tutoring, and either Oscar or myself are going to be helping you with the rest of these from letter A, which is due by the end of the week, okay? Here we go. Let's begin with number 1. It says the sign of negative alpha. This little fishy here is called an alpha. It's the first letter of the Greek alphabet. And so it's a sign of negative alpha. Since sine always follows the rules, all you got to do is remember that you're going to end up with negative the sign of alpha. And guess what? You're finished. That's right. Again, refer back to here. The sign of negative u is equal to negative the sign of u. Okay? Number 1. All the rest of these, I'm going to have to flip this over because they're kind of long, okay? Alrighty, so we have a sign here. Sine of theta minus 270. So this is a sign with a negative. So what was the song? It was sine, cosine, cosine, sine. And then if that was a negative, then so will this be because sine always follows the rules. Now, as far as the two values here, you're going to write theta 270, theta 270. And then, of course, you're going to do the math. So here, we're going to take a look at this one here, and we're going to need to go find out what the cosine of 270 is. So when you go make your little unit circle, 270 is here, 0, negative 1. Remember that the first one is always cosine and the second one is always sine. So this here is the sine of theta. Cosine of 270 is 0 minus cosine of theta. Sine of 270 is negative 1. This, of course, cancels out because it's 0. So you end up with negative 1 times negative. That means that the answer is cosine theta. Okay? That was a sine. Let's go try a cosine. All right, what was the song for cosine? Oh, I remember. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. So cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Now cosine is a weirdo that doesn't like to follow the rules. Okay, so if that's a plus, this is a minus. And of course, these always go in order. Alpha, 90, alpha, 90. Okay? Now, let's go make our little circle and remember what the cosine of 90 was. So now, when you make your circle up here at 90, this is 0, 1. Once again, the cosine is 0, the sine is 1. So let's see, this is cosine alpha, cosine 90, which is 0, minus the sine of alpha, sine of 90, which is 1. Yet again, this cancels out because 0 times anything is always 0, and the answer is 1 times this, which is negative the sine of alpha. That's number 3. As you can see, they're not that challenging, right? Let's jump over to number 7, mainly because the other ones that are there are also cosine and cosine. So having done one cosine, I'm going to jump over and do the other cosine. Now, you're probably wondering why I skipped number 6. Yes, I'm going to skip number 6 because it has some answers that are the double angles. In other words, sine 2 theta or cosine 2 theta. And that's number 7. So anything that has to do with sine of double angles or cosine or tangent of double angles with a 2 in it, 2 theta, 2 theta. Skip for now. It will not be in any other quizzes coming up. It'll be next week's material. So here is number 7. You're going to notice in number 7 that this is cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Oh, I seem to remember that little song. This one here is going backwards. So since it's cosine, cosine, sine, sine, I'm going to remember that this is the cosine song. And I'm going to put my little parentheses. And I also remember that cosine doesn't follow the rules. So that's a minus. That means that this is a plus. Now, as far as the values, remember they always go in order. So alpha minus beta and then beta. Yes, this is not a capital B, it's a beta. The only difference is it has a little stick coming out of the bottom here, okay? So now let's go do the math in there. This is the cosine of alpha minus beta plus beta. So the betas cancel out, and the answer is the cosine of alpha. Okay? You don't have to go the long way if you recognize the song. But that may have been a little bit too fast, huh? Alrighty, let's try again with number 8. Let's see, this guy starts with a sine. Sine, cosine, cosine, sine. Hey, that sounds like the sine song. So write your sine. And then, of course, your parentheses. Now, sine follows the rule, so if this is a minus, this is definitely a minus, right? So now I'm going to put the numbers in order, 45 and 15. This will now give you the sine of 45 minus 15, which is 30. And if you remember, based on your triangle, opposite 30 is always 1, 1, 2, radical 3. What is the sine of 30? Opposite over hypotenuse, which is, of course, 1/2. Okay? What about this song? Which song is this? Well, it starts with a cosine. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Okay. That means this is a cosine song again. That is a plus, so this is going to be a minus because cosine doesn't follow the rules. Put your number in order, 180. In order, 180. And if you do the subtraction, you end up with a cosine of 20, which of course is not one of your special angles, 30, 45, or 90, which means that that is the answer for number 9. Okay. Number 10, I've only wanted to do it again, even though it's repetitious, because some of you may be confused with this little notation here. All it means is 3 radians, okay? 4 radians. Other than that, it's still the same old thing. Cosine, cosine, sine, sine. That's the cosine song. So, doesn't follow the rules. Put your minus, and then put your 3 radians and your 4 radians this place. And so this is the cosine of negative 1 radian. 3 minus 4 is negative 1 radian. But what do we know about the cosine here? Let's go take a look at the answers and see which one it is. That whenever you start with a negative here, I was just looking at the answers, cosine doesn't follow the rules. So because I started with a negative, you're going to end up with a positive. And so it would be letter A on your assignment there, okay? Number 13, a little bit harder now. It says for you to find the sine of a over b, a plus b, when the cosecant of a is negative 5 over 3 and the cosecant of b is negative 13 over 5. However, it says that they are both in quadrant 3. So here are my two diagrams of a in quadrant 3 and b in quadrant 3. They're going to give me some values for me to play around with here, and that is that cosecant of a is negative 5 over 3. That means this is 5, and this is negative 3, because cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Okay, always from your reference angle. The cosecant of b over here, from your reference angle, is negative 13 over 5. However, this is negative here, right? Because you're coming down. All right, so that's the setup based upon what this is giving me. However, I am missing some numbers, so let me go get those numbers. And that is that this here is negative 4, because it's a 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triple. And this here is negative 12, because this is a 5, 12, 13 Pythagorean triple. And they're both negative because they're going in the negative direction, right? All righty, so now back to our song. The song of sine is sine, cosine, cosine, sine. Of course, sine always follows the rules, and all you got to do is put A, B in order. Okay? Now I'm going to put my parentheses here, and all I got to do is go get their values and substitute it in. For example, the sine of A is opposite over hypotenuse, negative 3 over 5. The cosine of B is adjacent over hypotenuse, negative 12 over 13. The cosine of A is adjacent over hypotenuse, so negative 4 over 5. The sine of B is opposite over hypotenuse, which is negative 5 over 13. If you do the multiplication here, a negative times a negative is a positive, you're going to end up with 36 over 65. Negative times negative is again a positive, so plus 20 over 65. And when you add it all up, yep, you get 56 over 65, which is your answer. Okay. Finally, we get to see a tangent. We haven't seen any tangents yet, huh? All right, so what was the song for tangent, tangent? Yep, it was tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. Okay, so let's go write that down. Let's see. Tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. There's the song. Now remember, it's sine over cosine, the definition of tangent as an identity. The top will carry the negative because it's the sine part, it follows the rules, but the bottom part will carry a positive because it's the cosine part and it doesn't follow the rules. All right, let me go put pi over 4x, pi over 4x, because those guys always go in the right order as you see them, right? Okay, so now I got to go figure out what pi over 4 tangent is, and I am going to remind you that pi over 4 is just another way of saying 45 degrees, but in radians. And if you take a look at your little old Fifi, the tangent of pi over 4, which is 45 degrees, is 1 over 1. So that means that this is 1 minus the tangent of x all over 1 plus tangent of pi over 4 is 1, the tangent of x. So when you do the math and you substitute x, tangent of x, I think it said, let me read, it says that tangent of x is equal to 2. So anywhere where I see a tangent of x, I'm going to plug in 2. This is going to give me 1 minus tangent of x, which is 2. 1 plus the tangent of x, which is 2. So if you do the math, this is negative 1 over 3 for number 16, which is letter B. Okay? Yeah, I know. We should practice another tangent just in case, huh? Okay, let's go do one more tangent, and then I will have finished my half that I promised you, okay? Here we go. This again is a tangent. So the song, tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. Okay. Tangent, tangent, 1, tangent, tangent. Okay? And it equals to 5. I'm going to put in my signs, and remember that the top is true because it's the sine part, but the bottom is not going to follow. It's not going to follow the rules, so it's a plus. Put the values in order. 135b, 135b. Let's go do the math. Well, doing the math means I need to know what the value of 135 is. So I'm going to come over here to 135. That would be that rotation. And of course, that means that my reference angle is 45 degrees. So 1 radical 2 because it's a fifi, but this guy here is negative. That means that the tangent of 135 is -1, opposite over adjacent. So this is -1 minus the tangent of b all over 1 plus tangent of 135 is -1, and then tangent of b is equal to 5. But remember that a plus and a minus, this is really a negative here, right? And one more hint, I'm going to put a little 1 right there so I can cross multiply, right? Alrighty, so let's go do the math if I cross multiply. If I cross multiply this way, you'll end up with 5 minus, because this is a minus, 5 tangent of b is equal to -1 minus the tangent of b. And all I gotta do is go figure out what the tangent of b is. So let me do it this way. Let me add 5 tangent of b plus 5 tangent of b. Let me add 1 and add 1, and then cancel those and cancel those because they're opposites. On the left, you'll end up with 6, and on the right, 5 take away 1 is 4 tangent of b. And if you divide by 4, what will the tangent of b equal? Yep, the tangent of b will equal to 3 over 2, and there's the answer, okay? Now, time for you to practice. Of course, if you need to finish up and have more questions, come back and see us at tutorial. We'll gladly be there to help you. We miss you. We love you. Hope to see you guys really, really soon. And by the way, here's a keyword for you should you need it in the very near future for your quiz on Friday. Hint, hint. The keyword is Dodgers. Go Dodgers! I miss them. Bye.